Sup, bitches?
You're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to another episode of Overanalyzing. Now, it's no surprise that I've been really into Hotline Miami lately, especially Hotline Miami 2, hence all of the streams of it, as well as the review I did just recently. This video will have spoilers for Hotline Miami 2, so you have been warned. Something that I really like about Hotline Miami 2 is its cast of characters. It's got quite a few characters, 12 of which are playable, and my favorite character is the son, but we're not really going to be talking about him today. Instead, we're going to be talking about my second favorite character, which is Manny Pardo. Now, before I get into my theory that I have for this video, I'll give a brief kind of rundown of who Pardo is. Manny Pardo is a detective. He's hunting a serial killer called the Miami Mutilator, who mutilates bodies, hence the name. Early on in the game, Pardo is depicted as, kind of the tough as nails, does stuff by his own rules, doesn't follow the book at all type detective. He's got a very cynical attitude, and he was born with thick skin, as he says himself. Now, Pardo has 3 playable levels: Homicide, Dead Ahead, and Caught, all of which have grown to be some of my favorite levels in the game, especially Dead Ahead. Now, in the level Caught, we're given a very big piece of information that completely changes and recontextualizes Pardo as a character. That being that Pardo himself is, in fact, the Miami Mutilator, the serial killer that he's been hunting. This actually went over my head the first time I played it, because I thought maybe the dream was, him being worried that he'd be framed for it somehow. Don't really know the logic I had with that on my first playthrough, but on subsequent playthroughs I obviously got it. Pardo himself has been killing people in order to be the hero who solves his own case, and he also doesn't like the Miami masked maniac killings like Jacket, Richter, and Jake. He hates all of their killings as well as the ones of the fans because they draw attention away from his killings and the case that he's trying to get to gather attention. Now, there's many theories I've heard about Manny Pardo, some of which involve him using other people in order to carry out the crimes, hence the messages that say stuff like, "they made me do it," and stuff like that. Not to mention there are clues that Pardo was the Miami Mutilator early on. For instance, there's a cameraman that appears briefly during Homicide, which I think could be interpreted to be a representation of him imagining them making a movie of him after he solves the case, quote-unquote. And then he has a similar cameraman and camera set motif in the dream in Caught, which itself, I think is meant to be like him dreading if they made a movie about him being the killer rather than the hero that stopped him. You can also find Jack tied up in Pardo's trunk during the intro to Dead Ahead, as well as him planting Jack's wallet at the scene, but we'll get to that a little more later. Pardo himself does also have some connections to the Russians, the extent of which are never fully elaborated on. He did have a connection with Petrov, and he does take out the Colombians for them in Dead Ahead. Not to mention, he does try to meet the son. I saw a pretty good video by Yaster about the son actually being his accomplice in the Miami Mutilator case, where the son was the one actually carrying out the killings or having lackeys do it. That, however, is not my theory. My theory is a little bit different, and it's based solely on one piece of information, but also thematically, and also it's just a way that I like to look at it because I really like the character, and I think this adds another layer of complexity to him. So my theory is that Pardo is doing vigilante killings by killing criminals in order to use them as the Miami Mutilator victims. Now, the main key piece of information that I have to go on this is because there's only one Miami Mutilator victim we actually know anything about, and that is Jack. Now, Jack himself is friends with the fans, and he sends the fans to kill a bunch of his sister's friends who are all drug users and lowlives. So yeah, his sister's associated with thugs, and he himself is associated with the fans who are crazed killers. So since Jack is in that sort of scenario, it's not that much of a stretch to think, well, Jack himself is probably also a criminal. At the very least, he's aware of what the fans are doing, not to mention he told them to go and kill these people that were with his sister. Jack, as I said, is the one tied up in Pardo's trunk at the beginning of Dead Ahead, as well as the one whose wallet he plants at the scene, because Jack's wallet is missing from the crime scene, and he plants it at the Swan's house, Alex and Ash, because maybe he's trying to somewhat implicate the fans for being the mutilator. One would also be able to sort of infer that maybe he got the information of where the fans live from Jack somehow by torturing him before killing him. So, in my theory, what if all of the Miami Mutilator victims were criminals, and in fact were maybe even criminals that had escaped justice or didn't have evidence against them, and Pardo took it into his own hands? Now, he would still be a sadistic killer in this scenario because he still mutilates the body and still wants to gain fame from doing it. I've never heard anyone even mention the possibility that his victims were criminals. I always see people say, oh, he killed innocent people. Do we really know that? Like, I'm seriously asking, if there's some piece of lore that I'm unaware of that confirms that they weren't, then please feel free to let me know. Pardo himself is definitely a complicated and mysterious character in his motivations. Even Richard doesn't get him. Like, when you do a new game file after beating the game, Richard even says, "You I don't get." Many people have speculated as to what exactly that means. Some people have said it's because Pardo's a sociopath and Richard can't play on his empathy or any of that because he doesn't have any. Others have said it's because Pardo was already in his own delusion, so Richard can't really fuck with his thoughts because Pardo just has his own delusions that he's completely drowned in. I'd say it is one of those things that's definitely open to interpretation, but I also think this is definitely open to interpretation. What if Pardo is killing these people who are criminals? What if he is doing some sort of vigilante justice? Now, that doesn't mean I don't think that Pardo's maybe sociopathic in some regard. I mean, look at how brutally he mutilates them. And again, Richard can't really get through to him in any way, hence why Richard actually never confronts him in the main game. It's only in that one scene, and Pardo's only response is, "So what, you're here to judge us?" Another key factor that makes me really like this theory is the real guy that he's named after, the real Manny Pardo, was a former detective that killed a bunch of drug dealers and claimed that he was doing it to clean up the streets. Whether or not that's true is immaterial. I'm just saying it makes sense to the character if that's kind of what they're going for. Now again, there's no direct evidence to suggest this in the game. I fully admit I am simply headcanoning this because it made sense to me. That it would be some sort of deranged vigilanteism that goes over the top and has him mutilate the corpses and also try and make it into a serial killer that he's investigating. It is also fun to speculate on whether or not the Russians are connected to him in what way, because obviously he has some connection, we just don't know what they are. But that said, with this theory, I'm going with the concept that I think Pardo probably carried out the killings himself. And in fact, maybe his connection with the Sun is the Sun was maybe giving him information, or maybe if not the Sun, then maybe Petrov, was giving him information on criminals to take out. Maybe they were giving him information of rival criminals, and he was using that as an excuse to go get them. Again, hopefully I got my points across in a good way here, but I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and it just is really interesting to me to try and think about Pardo's actions and his motivations behind it, because I really like the character. And so thinking about it in this way gives him a little bit more justification. He'd still be a sadistic killer, but it makes him more interesting if they are in fact criminals that he's killing. And it would play into sort of his cynicism and his hatred for the city and the griminess of it and things like that. So that's kind of why I've come to this kind of conclusion myself. It's strictly my theory, it's certainly not confirmed, but it is the way that I've seen to interpret the character. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Overanalyzing. This has been Fugitive Red-Eye. Have a good one. Toodles!
You take forever to say nothing.
What are you doing? Subscribe to Fugitive Red-Eye.